So, welcome back from Bessemer, Alabama. You went with Left Voice
Yes.
and wrote some amazing articles. Um, tell me, uh, tell me a little bit about like what was your first impressions? What was the first thing you guys kind of like? What was the sort of itinerary for the trip?
Yeah, so we really wanted to talk to workers. One thing we had been seeing before going down is that a lot of the press, it seemed, wasn't really talking to average Amazon workers, or if they did, it was like the same two people every time.
Hmm.
So going in, we really wanted to get as many, interviews with workers as possible.
Yeah.
And I have to shout out one of our reporters, Tati, who went before all of us and did a great job at like making connections. I
Hmm.
don't know that we would have been able to talk to as many people if not for her.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was a big part of that. I mean, that was the central part. We really wanted to meet people who are in the warehouse who can talk about the conditions, who can talk about the union effort, and from there we were like, okay, we'll get a sense of the community, of what Amazon is up to, who's responding. So that was our plan, or at least the plan we went in with.
Hmm.
And we did end up talking to two workers, one on camera, Francis Wallace,
Hmm.
and then one was an anonymous worker who we have a print interview with,
Yes.
and that those were great experiences. Along with that, we also tried to report on some of the repression that we saw on the ground.
Hmm.
We learned that separate from the Amazon effort, there is a strong Black Lives Matter movement there, people fighting for abolition and, accountability for police murders and violence in the state.
Hmm.
So we didn't go in intending to cover that, but as we met people, we were like, this is another thing we want to highlight.
That's so
So I would
interesting.
say that sort of is overall for people who are new to our coverage. That encompasses what we went in and were planning on doing, and then what we ended up doing.
Hmm. Awesome. And yeah, so I was reading through some of the articles and I pulled a couple of quotes that I thought were interesting to highlight. And let's see, should we start there? I don't know. Is that boring? Let's see. Oh yeah, okay. So I did see your latest article. I don't know if we should start there, but whatever. We'll figure it out later. Uh, that the workers have to pay a 1% tax. And this was your
Sorry,
article. So please
is that
explain.
like? So sorry, what are you saying?
I said this was your article. Please explain, or millennial explain if you are a millennial.
Yeah, I am. I'm like right at the cutoff.
Oh yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, yeah, no. Some people insist I'm a Zoomer, but I am a baby with computers, so I'm a millennial. Um, but yeah, that was, and I'm really glad that that article seemed to get a lot of traction because that's some shit that's been going under the radar. Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, please.
That's some shit that's been going under the radar. So for people who don't know, one thing we learned while we were there from talking to workers is that part of why there's a few reasons I think that Amazon chose Bessemer. A big reason is that it's a very impoverished community that they hoped and probably were right would be easy to exploit.
Hmm.
So that's part of the reason they chose Bessemer. But my understanding is another reason they chose Bessemer is because the government of Alabama uh, incentivized Amazon to build a facility in Alabama
Hmm.
by promising to subsidize the cost. So
Hmm.
basically, pay Amazon to come to the state and, I guess in their words, provide jobs. I don't know that I'm going to thank Amazon for that, um, but yeah, that's I think the thinking of course, the government who wants them there is they'll provide jobs, and because of that, we want to pay them so they'll come here.
Right. I
So
think
the
that
way,
happened in a few facilities, right? I remember there being a few years ago some kind of a, like bidding war on where the next facility was going to be put, right?
yeah, and they were
Yeah.
promising, these cities were promising obscene things. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I remember it was, yeah, they were just making ridiculous promises.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what's going on here is I don't think it's as bad as some of what we were seeing way back when, but what's
Hmm.
happening is in order to pay Amazon to subsidize the BHM1 facility, that's where the union effort's going on,
Hmm.
the Alabama government is paying part of the cost, I think half, I could be wrong,
Hmm.
but a certain amount of the cost of the facility over the course of 10 years by taking taxes, by taxing all workers in Bessemer and I believe also Birmingham.
Wow.
Uh, it is
So it's not
charging
just the Amazon workers, it's all workers?
it's
Okay.
all workers. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's called the Bessemer occupational tax.
Oh,
And
could you find a creepier name?
um I mean I'm sure they thought it sounded great.
Like it
But
sounds like the
yeah,
Death Star, but all right.
they are charging workers in Bessemer taxes to go directly to Amazon, which I
Hmm.
believe is the second wealthiest company in the world.
Yeah.
I think Apple is number one, but so
Okay.
there. Yeah. So that I wrote an article on that. Most of the trip I was doing either promoting or behind the scenes work. That's the one article that I specifically wrote about. And I'm glad you bring it up because it is a thing that just shows I think the power imbalance, like the fact that workers don't really have a power. It highlights why they need a union. And so, I felt it was important to cover.
It was. Yes, absolutely. I mean, and that's definitely not something they talk about. Anybody has been talking about for sure. Um, okay. So yeah, let me look at my listy of stuff here. I hate to be a bitch. Would it be possible to take down the painting behind your head as your face is kind of like blending into it?
I don't actually think I can. Here.
Okay, then don't worry about it. It's really
Okay,
no big
cool.
deal.
Here, if I scoot up, does that work at all? Does that
It's
help?
just that is not really, but that's okay.
Sorry, I'm not in the apartment.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine. I'm sorry. I shouldn't
No,
even
you're
said
good.
anything. Okay. Oh, yes. And I wanted to, is it this article? I just wanted to compliment you actually on the how you wrote that article because um I mean, if any of this got reported in the mainstream media, we would hear maybe like one article about, there being an Amazon incentive to go there. Then years later, we'd hear another article about there being, you know, a union, right? Like we wouldn't put it together that this is happening. But I love that the way it was like in the first paragraph, the way that you said it, it was just like, they are charging you to exploit you. And that's just, yes, yes, that's what's happening. Absolutely. So I just want to add that in there.
Mhm.
um yeah, so I love that. Oops. Okay, I'll break. Yeah, I pulled another quote that said they don't actually care about anything but getting their product out. Why did I write this? Oh yeah, okay. I'm so sorry, this is gonna
No,
happen
you're
like
good. You're good.
it's just the nature of my mind. um right, oh, this was the article, um where was it Tatiana wrote about the link between this fight and the Black Lives Matter movement. And I mean, I particularly found that article interesting and powerful because I mean, Black Lives Matter should matter to police, but they also should matter to their employers. I mean, it is exactly the same fight. Um, and so in reading this quote, I'm just going to read some of it here. Um, they don't care whether or not you make them money because Amazon hires so many people on each week that they just think, oh, well, if you leave, we can find somebody to replace you. And so they find no value in their actual workers. And I identified a lot with that, actually. I think that a lot of young people do, because we're statistically the ones that are working these kinds of jobs, or we're working the retail jobs, we're working the low wage gig worker shift jobs. And I I've thought about it, and I think at literally every job I've ever had, I've been directly told that I'm replaceable by my boss. Every job. Have you had a similar experience?
I haven't.
Okay,
Um,
good for you.
I no, I mean, well, and this is a whole other thing. I'm currently going through the process. I'm on the autism spectrum, and finding work
Yeah.
that I can do that accommodates my disability is its own thing. So I'm not even really in a position where I'm expendable. I'm just not hireable right now.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
that's
God.
a
Yeah.
sidetrack. But
No. Ableism is real. It's real and
Mhm.
it's harsh, and it's messed up.
Well,
Because the thing
actually,
is, what?
oh no, I only learned this like this month, but apparently like half of adults on the autism spectrum are only half of them are employed.
Hmm.
So yeah, no, I just thought that was super interesting, and certainly I'm noticing it more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I have a friend on the spectrum that has trouble finding full-time employment. I have another friend who has cerebral palsy, which is a physical disability, and he has a very difficult time finding jobs. It's just not, it's not something that would ever be able to be fought in court, because when you go to the interview, they can always say, oh, well, we were looking for somebody else, or they can find other excuses, and it's not exactly under the equal rights law, which I forget the name of it right now, but um yeah, it's maddening for sure. So I hear you on that one. um you made a comment on the other show that you went on. What was the name of it?
Facts on the ground.
Facts on the Ground. Yeah, it was excellent. And you said that you were a little bit disappointed in how it was sort of a top down organization. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking that because I think it's important to highlight. It was a big part of our experience. Before I get into it, I just want to say that part of why I've been hesitant to talk about it is that I think that a lot of people get the sense that if there's problems with how the union effort was done, that means it wasn't worth supporting, and I don't want to give that idea. I think a
Right.
flawed union effort is still better than no union effort at all.
Absolutely.
Uh, that said, in my experience, this was a very flawed union effort. So Left Voice had contacted in the weeks before heading down. We emailed the press contact for the union
Hmm.
and never heard back. I didn't do the contacting with them for Left Voice, but my understanding is they had Left Voice had emailed them multiple times, hadn't heard back. I actually, for my separate podcast, Newsdive,
Hmm.
not affiliated with Left Voice, but I had emailed like a month before I went down to report for Left Voice. I had emailed the press contact, hadn't heard back from them.
Wow.
So that we went in with that, and at one point we showed up to the union office. We entered, and we were seeing is there a way we can get in contact with some workers or someone who could speak to us as press. And they were very rude. They were like looking at their phone and trying to like brush us away without saying it.
Mm-mm.
Um, it was very gatekeepy.
Mm.
And I'm actually very proud that we were able to speak to as many workers as we were because we weren't given access. We had to make our own connections. with members of the community and
Oh.
establish trust like independently, and we did do that. So, but yeah, it very much felt like I didn't see. It was very hard to get in touch with workers, and I think part of that, and I think this is accurate, a reason the union gave is that they don't want workers to be at risk, because if they show up, if they're getting involved, that means they could get fired. And I think that part of that is true, I'm sure.
Right.
But we went to the big rally that everyone was talking about, Bernie Sanders, Killer Mike,
Mm-hmm.
and there were quite a few speeches there. You had the main event where Killer Mike and Bernie Sanders spoke, and then before that you had this other sort of smaller speaking thing going on outside. And in both cases, only one worker spoke. It
Mm.
was mostly people announcing their, I guess, Democratic campaigns or what organization they're there with.
Mm.
Uh, and it didn't really feel focused on the workers at all. In fact, when we tried to talk to workers at the event, it was sort of like they had handlers.
Oh.
Like, they felt very out of it. Like, there was,
Mm.
like, they didn't know what was going on. Like, the union wasn't really communicating with them.
Mm.
At one point, a worker spoke in, like, the parking lot, and then press came up to him, and I came up to him. I was holding a mic, and he was talking about his experiences. He was very into it, and a few different press people from different outlets were holding mics up to him, and like three different people with the union like come up from behind and be like, "Okay, we need to get him back into the union building now."
Wow.
Um, and like I remember at one point after Bernie Sanders spoke, all of the press went to try to get a quote with him. Ooh, sorry, one thing worth noting is that it was kind of clear which reporters had like been allowed to talk to workers. Like you could tell if they were like chummy with the union or not.
Like bigger
Um,
name ones? Like what were the other outlets there? I'm sure they're all the big
I
ones, or
don't want to start conflicts with people.
oh,
So
okay.
I will say, I will not say any specific names or outlets, but I will say that it was not reader funded, primarily reader funded outlets that were getting the most support from the union.
Sure, sure. Okay.
Um, and yeah, I remember at one point after Bernie Sanders spoke, all the press went up to him and Killer Mike to try to get quotes. And meanwhile, there were like five workers who were just lingering there that no one was talking to. And, we at Left Voice, we were like, oh, great, we've been trying to get in touch with workers. Let's get in touch with them. Let's talk to them
Yeah.
right now. And it felt like the union was like eyeing us the whole time. And like, then as soon as like the entrance to the union office cleared up and Bernie Sanders and Mike run, like they made all of the workers go back into the office.
Mm.
So it felt very, very like not not it felt very top down, very gatekeepy.
Yeah.
In fact, at one point the next day, one of the workers we talked to at the event, we'd gotten her number, and she texted us being like, "Hey, do you know when this press conference is today?" And we were like, "We didn't know there's a press conference, but more importantly, how is it that this worker who you had speaking at the event yesterday doesn't even know what time your press conference is?"
Yeah. That's
So
not
yeah,
cute.
no, it's and I really appreciate you asking about this because
Yes.
again, while I don't want to have that be the main takeaway that people have about the union effort, I do
Right.
think it's important for people to know because I think that if this union effort fails, it will primarily be because Amazon is a horrible company that invested a lot of resources into shutting down the union effort.
Mm.
But it will also partially be because the union and some local groups, or maybe not even groups, but certain people within groups, uh, it'll be because their approach was more on getting support from the Democratic Party than it
Mm.
was on actually organizing the workers at Amazon to fight for this union campaign and inform them
Mm.
of the power of a union.
Interesting. But when you say the union, can you sort of clarify who you're talking about?
RW Wait,
The
RDWS?
retail. Yeah,
Oh,
crap.
wow,
I
I'm
had it.
blanking on it.
No,
But
hold on.
it's,
I'm looking it up.
yeah, thank you.
I found it too. I wanted to look up their history actually. I found a video of like, well, I guess the president of that union talking to, I can't remember if it was CBS. It was one of the big ones, and he was just saying some faff about this vote and making an appearance on TV about it. But yeah, I was like, I've worked in retail for years, and I'm thinking I've never even heard of this union, never even
I,
heard of it,
I
and that
think they are
sounds,
big, but I don't think they're big among workers. I think they're
yeah,
big among their preferred political party.
that's so. But how? Then why? you know?
Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU.
Okay, retail, wholesale, and department store.
Mhm.
Retail, wholesale, and department store. That's weird that they added department stores like an extra. Why wouldn't you just add that as retail? That's weird. I guess department stores used to be a big um enterprise like back in the day. If you worked for a department store, you'd be able to live above it.
They were,
Like
yeah,
they
they
would
were.
house
Mhm.
you and feed you. I mean, that's can we get some of that, please?
Want my employer housing and feeding me, but I would like if with a job you can also be housed and fed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be fun to live in a boarding house, but I mean, at least you don't have people, that are homeless and still working. I mean, because
Oh
that's
no.
happening, you know. Anyway, so that's cool. All right. So when you're talking about the union, you're talking about that union. Okay.
Yeah, and specifically the chapter in Birmingham.
Okay.
I mean, probably, I think they could have done more to organize on a national level. They could have had, their chapters throughout the country do more to publicize the union effort in Alabama. If I was involved in the union, that's what I would have suggested.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I can't speak for what seemed to be going on the national level of the union. I can talk about the gatekeeping that I noticed specifically from the Birmingham chapter, and a lot of, in my opinion, way too chummy with both corporate news outlets over independent outlets,
Mm-hmm.
and the Democratic Party over the workers at the Amazon facility.
Wow. Wow. That's not cool. So if the Amazon workers are successful in this vote, what does that do? Does that establish a union specifically for Amazon workers, or does it include them in this RW long name?
So it would mean that specifically the Amazon workers at the BHM1 facility in Bessemer
Mm-hmm.
would be able to, if they want to, become members of the larger RWDSU.
Okay.
And I think that's, I'm actually admittedly, like, this was my first time labor reporting,
Mm-hmm.
but my my understanding is that this whole vote was, yeah, this whole vote was basically so that workers are even allowed to join the union because Alabama's a right to work state,
Mm-hmm.
and so that basically means that you don't have to join the union in order to uh, work at the Amazon facility, but it would mean that workers who do want to join the union would be able to join without Amazon, yeah, in theory at least, without Amazon retaliating.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Could Without
And
Amazon
just so,
retaliating.
sorry, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Just putting it together in my brain. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. And yeah, I encourage people to check out Love Voices reporting because I think so, personally feel that so far I've been very accurate, but
I
just
have.
to
I've
cover
read it.
myself,
Yes.
if I haven't been, people should check out Left Voice. Left Voice, we did our research and then wrote it, and we're not trying to remember off the top of our head. So
Absolutely. Yes. And again, like, sorry about my constant flakiness, but
no,
I will make this look pretty. I will make this look pretty. Don't worry about that. Like, um, I kind of, my idea with this show, which is a sidetrack, is like I kind of want to add in stuff, while we're talking, like, so when I forgot the name of I would said really long name and then I had my hand out, like I want to just have like a title that says that there, like I want to have like stickers, emojis, I want to have like, pictures of, footage and, articles and stuff pop up around us and shit. So
and
hopefully
if
it's gonna be
you, I'm
pretty.
sure you can use, as long as it's like clear that it's from Left Voice, feel free to like
Yeah,
use.
thanks. Absolutely. Thank you. And you're, again, like all of the articles I've read on this incident and everything from Left Voice has just been on point, like excellent and succinct, which is seriously appreciated for those of us who are very busy. So,
Yeah. Well, one
yeah.
thing that Left Voice I know tries to highlight is that we don't see ourselves as journalists. I mean, I see myself as a journalist. I know there are some people who like see themselves as journalists, but it's the idea that it's like we want to write as workers for workers. So,
Yes.
yeah, we don't want to be like, I don't know, pretentious, like covering it. Like, here's this, this, and this. Like no, it's what do people want to know? Here's what they want to know.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's such a necessary attitude. And honestly, I think in general, I think that the left would benefit from taking that media track because it's I am recently been immersing myself in theory and the podcasts, and I'm just trying to educate myself on the background of the left. And there's a lot of academia, there's a lot of people who seem to have a lot of time to sit there and explain things.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching one talk today on socialism, and it took him 20 minutes to get even to the point of the talk, which was about co-ops. Like literally 20 minutes to even mention the word co-op.
Sounds right. See, I love stuff like that,
I mean, I'm
but
interested, but
that
like,
can't be the only thing.
yeah, I mean, like, you can't expect the general public to be able to consume that kind of. I mean, they don't have the time or the interest. I mean, like, we have to be able to, make different kinds of content for different kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to get into that, but yeah, actually, my next quote kind of addresses what we were just talking about with the Democratic politicians that were there at the rally. And let's see, let me just read this. It says, Abrams' support certainly brought attention to the unionization struggle, but the sign gives the wrong message, a message that unions all over the country impart to workers. Over and over, they tell workers that their power comes from the Democratic Party politicians, that their power is at the polls, and that workers are helpless without the support of politicians. Nothing could be further from the truth. And that is from dispatches from the Amazon warehouse in Bessemer on Left Voice. Please check out that article. That's a very powerful statement. And honestly, we're seeing that play out in real time. We're seeing that play out in real time. And I wonder what mention of the PRO Act was there from any of the speakers, and like, did anyone try to relate that to what was going on?
I don't think so.
Okay, just checking.
I think, honestly, a lot of the speeches were very vague. Not vague, but very just general. Like, they could have been applied to any moment in time. Some specifics, of course, about Alabama, about Amazon, but
Oh
it
Lord.
didn't seem, a lot of speeches didn't seem attached to like a larger issue. It felt, and that was, I think, an intentional thing, that it felt very insular. It felt like, you deserve this union because Jeff Bezos is bad, but don't think any further than that.
Yeah.
And that's just my reaction. So I don't want to like go ahead and say like this is how I interpreted the speeches, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel as tied to a larger view of the world. It felt very specific to vote yes on the union. That's the speech.
Right. Okay. Oh yeah, this one talks about how the local police were hired to moonlight as Amazon security. There's a word for that. I forget what it is.
Union busting? No, because
Yeah, but
they
there's like
weren't
a
going
word
after
for.
union people. Well, they were going after canvassers, but that's not the same as union busting. Yeah,
Yeah,
so, sorry,
so
I just got sidetracked.
no, totally, that's fine. Yeah, there's definitely a name for for heavies that do that, and I just can't remember it because it's like 30s, and I don't know the lingo, but
Mhm.
anyway, yeah. So tell me a little bit about the struggle that Left Voice had with the cops. What did what did they do to you?
Yeah, so it was me, Maddie, and Luigi. There were five of us, and we had split up at different points. So when that happened, it was me, Maddie, and Luigi went to the facility to do like a report on the ground with the facility in the background. Be like, we're here in Bessemer, where this, and this is going on. And so Maddie and Luigi did that. Luigi did the filming, Maddie did the reporting, and you can find the video on Left Voice. But meanwhile, I was canvassing, like holding. Well, I didn't really do much. I just held a sign. But there were other people. There were two other people there who were canvassing and like trying to talk to drivers as they were going by.
Mm,
Actually, no, they weren't. Sorry, there was a reporter who was trying to talk to drivers as they were going by, and then it was me and two other people who were holding signs,
okay.
saying basically just saying vote union yes.
Okay.
So so I was, like just watching cars pass, watching every now and then, like looking over to see what Luigi and Maddie were going up to, and they took a little while filming the video, and then like right as they were wrapping up, I'm trying to remember the specific order. It was a cop car pulls up and starts talking to them, and then I forget the exact order, but at a certain point, another cop car ended like an Amazon card, like a Amazon, I guess, person in Amazon shirt pulls up in their cart and starts, and I couldn't hear, so this is what they told me afterwards, but I started filming because I'm like, okay, cops talking, we're
Yeah.
gonna film this. And
Mm,
from what I heard, it was that apparently, I don't even think it was the cops. I think it was the Amazon person specifically who was
mm.
like, I need to see your ID. Let me take your ID. And they were like, why would we give you our ID?
Yeah, like
Um,
an Amazon supervisor just coming out there to yell at you guys once your IDs.
yeah, and and it's like, what are you gonna do with it?
Yeah.
But so yeah, fortunately, they were able to navigate that. I think that they were press and that there were witnesses certainly helped. But what was interesting is that it revealed that the cops in Bessemer, like these were police with the town of Bessemer, were
Yeah.
working for the Amazon facility. Like from what I'd heard from Luigi and Maddie afterwards, it was the
Mm.
police were taking their orders like directly from the Amazon guy who pulled up in the cart.
Oh
And
my
I don't
God.
want to like let them off the hook for rolling up and chastising them. I don't want to be like, oh, it wasn't the police, it was the Amazon guy. I mean, it was them working together. But I think that's
Yeah.
such a perfect example of the role of police in capitalism
I
is
mean, it's
literally they
literal.
were taking
Yeah.
orders directly from some guy who does security for Amazon. Um, and so we had that. And afterwards, I was talking to one of the other people who I'd met, from holding signs, and he was saying that before we showed up, he had also been, um, near the facility, and that, like, 8 different cops showed up, and he gave them his ID just because he wasn't going to say no to like 8 different people. But yeah, so they had done that to multiple people, and we don't know what they were gonna do with IDs if they got them.
Yeah,
But I don't think we need to know. I think just in general, like they have no right to just take people's IDs because they get too close to the facility. I think
absolutely not.
yeah, it was
No
wild.
way.
It was really wild actually.
Yeah.
Not surprising, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, just super interesting.
Yeah. Like that kind of stuff falls into the category of like Amazon knows that it has all the money and all the lawyers, and it's pressing its luck on what they can get away with without a class action lawsuit on that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. I mean, that's just sickening.
And I think I'm trying to think about what they would need IDs for, and I mean the only thing I can think of is that they have better tabs on like who they already have caught trespassing, so that
Yeah.
if someone comes a second time, they can prove it and then show consequences. Because that was the thing where like both my colleagues and the other guy who I had been talking to, they had all gotten the warning that it's like you've crossed the property line. It ends, here, and if you cross it again, I don't know if they said they'd press. I think they did say they would arrest them if they crossed the property line again. That's a thing where don't quote me on it. I think it's in the article.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally it was that they would like warn you, and I guess if they could get your ID to keep track, and then fortunately no one found out what happens if you cross the property line a second time. But
Good.
yeah.
Ay, ay, ay. Oh my God. Okay, let's see what
Well,
else.
also, sorry, one other thing just
Oh
before
yeah,
the question
please.
I want to highlight is that
Yeah.
some people don't know it's a big facility and there's no clearly marked property line. Like there's a
Like
sign,
no
there's an
fence.
Amazon sign, and I think that's technically the property line, but it doesn't
Uh-huh.
say like this is private property and then this
Right.
isn't. So that's another thing where it's just so ridiculous because they're not even really clearly showing. They're just kind of, I think, hoping that if someone gets close enough that they can harass them, okay, we'll go and harass them.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I also saw a couple articles on Left Voice about the warehouses in Italy and Germany, the Amazon warehouses that also struck. Let's see. Italy staged a 24-hour strike. It crippled much of the company's logistics operations through the country. Three trade union confederations joined together to coordinate the strike, which is, I mean, if you compare that to where we are now, we got a
Yeah.
long way to go here. Yeah, for sure. So it was as much inspiring as it was depressing to read that, honestly. Also, it says, according to one union confederation, 75% of Amazon workers in Italy struck. So that's amazing. That's an amazing number. That's beautiful. But interestingly enough, in the article about Germany, they went on strike as well. It seems that they had been going on strike every year for a long time, and it seems that they would stay off the job for 4 straight days until the early hours of Friday. Their goal is to disrupt the Easter rush, the second busiest time of the year. Let's see. It's become a ritual. They do not surprise managers or disrupt business anymore. Amazon hires thousands of extra workers to cushion the strikes and the costs of unimaginable an amount of money, but it's not like Amazon is short. I mean, that's kind of crazy to me too, that like, and this is Amazon workers in Germany are on strike at leftvoice.org. Um, this is this says to me like, I'm obviously 3,000,000% in support of unionizing, but it says to me that that's not the end all be all as well, right? I mean, like, and it says to me also that maybe certain tactics we need to get a little more creative about, right? I mean, striking on the same at the same time every year is not super logical, I think, probably, because yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they would develop a strategy to cope with you doing that. They would just like mark you as a vacation at that point, I guess. But I mean, it says on the one hand, you know, what a monolith we're dealing with. Amazon being an international monolith, and on the other hand, it says how creative we're really going to have to get going forward in the way that we organize. I mean, and not just dodging the cops, but really figuring out ways that we can implement our asks, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm trying to think because I'm only now just really starting to learn about different ways that strikes have been done,
Hmm.
and I'm not too well versed in how Germany works. I'm sure that there is some validity to doing it at the same time every year. I mean, I don't know the reasons. Uh, I should read more on it, but
Well,
I
it
kind
says
of
that
feel
they
like
break at Christmas and Easter, so I think, like business wise, that probably made sense for the first couple of years.
yeah. And I guess even then, it's sort of like, well, once you've made a routine out of it, even if Amazon learns how to deal with it, it's still a hassle for them to deal with it. Like, I'm sure
Sure.
it's better than you not striking at all. But yeah, I think
Yes.
um, I think that strikes are a tactic, and with all tactics, how and when you apply them, it very much depends on the situation.
Yes.
So I think that there's probably some, power or statement or, advocating and encouraging other workers to be more involved that comes from choosing like the same time every year to strike. I'm sure that's part of the reason that they do it. I don't
Hmm.
want to speak for them. That's just what I
Oh
assume as
yeah.
an outsider. But yeah, I think you are right that another thing is like we need to we need to look at when and how we apply strikes, and that is unfortunately a thing where we need a union before we can even do that.
Right. 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 Absolutely. I have and I'm not the most well researched person. I'm still learning myself, of course, but I personally believe I'm a socialist, and I personally believe that if we are ever to really get uh, true equality, that we're going to have to take down some companies, but we're also going to have to take over some companies. As workers. I mean, I really believe in, I don't know. I'm sure that there are several tactics people use, share buybacks and whatever, but we're gonna have to press all the buttons in this fight. It's an epic one.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think 100%. I mean, I think in the U.S. because the approach that we've had is it's been socialism has been popularized electorally by like Bernie Sanders and AOC, and there's arguments about whether or not there's socialists or just using some socialist dialogue and policy. I'm not going to get into that,
Right.
but I think that regardless of what you think of that, I don't think it's helpful to view socialism as just better lives for workers. Because you can have all of the same exploitative things and just make it better for workers. Maybe they won't have any power necessarily, but they'll
Hmm.
have better housing, better health care, and those are
Sure.
absolutely things that we should fight for. But I
Yeah.
think that you're correct that if we really want socialism, we need to look at the original version of socialism. And I'd argue in most places outside, in probably anywhere outside of the U.S., what generally people think of as socialism, which is it's ultimately it's not that the workers have better lives; it's that the workers have the power.
Yes.
So I think you make a really important point with that.
Yes, absolutely. And just from a personal perspective, like I, you know, I have always had a job where I had a boss and I had a certain time where I had to be there. And I have always felt afraid to take days off. I have always felt afraid to come in 5 minutes late. I was docked pay. Sometimes my last job that I had, if I came in over 15 minutes late, they would dock half a day's pay. And absolutely, like even if I was being paid, you know, like even 50 grand a year to me would be like, I could go on a vacation and like it would be life changing for me. I even if I got paid that much money, and that doesn't seem like a big ask, even though half the country statistically is making 30,000 or less a year now. So it kind of is a big ask, I guess. Um, I would still be afraid to take days off because your bosses intentionally push you no matter what job you have. It is the nature of capitalism to push you to your limits. And they will always make you feel guilty for not giving everything you have to the company. And you cannot give everything you have to the company because the company does not provide for you 100%. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to take care of yourself. And so recently, I'm no longer in that job that I had just mentioned. I'm in a different job now, which is a much kinder experience for me, thank God, but it's still monetarily not the best thing in the world. And I found out that I can start door dashing for the same amount of money. And a lot of people, when we talk about the gig economy and like the Uberization of, workers and stuff like that, people are always kind of picturing this idealistic past of unions will just dissipate, and um you workers rights will just evaporate or whatever. I mean, I think that's kind of already happened firstly, and we've already had corporations that haven't been Uberized, so I would question that. But honestly, the fact that I can make my own schedule and there is nobody breathing down my neck is liberating. The fact that I'm in control of my day is so liberating. And that's an experience that all workers should have, period. All workers should have that feeling. Whether the company itself makes enough for them to be millionaires or whether they're just getting by, as long as you're able to have control over your day and make accommodations for yourself, like even when we were talking about ableism, right? Like I have PTSD and serious depression issues, and there are times when I've needed to leave work. There are times when I've needed to go to the bathroom for like a half hour just to get myself together, and it was always a problem, and I always had to lie to my bosses about the nature of it because I was afraid that I would be fired if they knew I was crying in the bathroom, just hands down. So, if I decide to DoorDash and if I'm my own boss, that's not something I'll ever have to worry about again. I mean, these things are liberating. And I think that we really need to, when we talk about workers' rights and we talk about this, the standard of living, we can't just say like, oh, $15 an hour, oh, like shorter days. Like we really need to think about, structurally how, we, you know, it's an oppressive mindset. It's an
Well,
oppressive, yeah.
that goes into something that's super important to Left Voice's editorial line. I'm not on the editorial board, by the way, so I just want listeners to know I write for them. I follow the conversation the editorial board had. I don't want to say my word is what Left Voice views, but I will say that one thing we've talked about a lot is this idea that in the U.S., maybe other countries, I can only speak for the US. In the US, people view unions as sort of a service. Like, I join a union and they get me better wages, better health care, more rights. But what we left voice we view as the point of a union. It's not that they are a service, that they provide things for you. I mean, yes, they do, but the real point of a union is that they're a form of power. And that's why we're so against a top-down approach to unions, because a top-down approach, if workers, for example, if and this is why it was important for us to connect, Black Lives Matter with the union effort, because if a worker in Birmingham is harassed by the police who are being paid to work right outside the facility, if like a black worker in this primarily a black facility is attacked by the police, and the union decides we want to go on strike until you get police out of our workplaces, away from us, the union's not necessarily going to support that, because that harms them politically. That harms their ability to work well with the Democratic Party. Yeah. And if the workers themselves don't have power in their union, and the union bureaucracy says, no, this is too radical, and it doesn't have to do with your work, we're not going on strike, then they don't go on strike. But if the workers have control of their union, then what they can do is they have power over the company to decide, we are going to screw up your profits until you say, yes, we will keep police away from you. And I think that's that idea of not just the economic benefits that a union gets you, but the power it gives you to fight for your well-being and the well-being of your coworkers in your community, is the real part of a union. They should be a way to push your politics, and not just a way to, like, a service that you pay for to get some benefits. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's an excellent way to put it. That, I mean, it should be, unions should be a source, like, like non-violently, the people's army, right? When fighting for political justices. Absolutely. That's an excellent way to put it. And I wish that we talked about it more in that light. I think, thanks for bringing that up. Let me see. I think that was most of the notes that I had. I kind of feel like, oh yeah, I totally had in my notes the RWDSU. Sorry. Oh, I could have made life easier for us. Oh Lord, sorry about that. Anything that you might want to tell me about any experiences that you had personally with some of the workers there? Is there anything? I know that one of the articles Left Voice came out with was about these anti-union text messages that everyone was getting. So it was an actual, and I saw the screenshots, and they were actually just straight up text messages. I thought at first it was part of an app, but it's not. It's like an actual text message to your phone. Wow. Yeah, that's I guess in the new age, to be expected, I guess. But word.
Sorry, just I want to highlight, because one thing I was saying is, like, a failure of the union is that they didn't put, like, so many, the workers we didn't talk to a lot, but all the workers we did talk to, they were like, yeah, I didn't hear like anything from the union about why unions are good or all, like, no emails, no texts. And meanwhile, Amazon is sending people multiple texts a day. I heard some reports 4 texts a day. So I think that's such a failure of the union bureaucracy that while Amazon is texting these workers so much, you're more interested in getting Bernie Sanders and Killer Mike and Nina Turner to hang out with you and make videos, but you're not actually contacting the people who are going to be voting on whether or not they have a union in their workplace. That feels like a failure to me.
A big one. I mean, especially if the vote doesn't work out, right? And we're still counting, right? At the as we're filming this, we're still waiting for results.
Yeah, there's some reports actually that right before I came on here, it's looking bad. It's
Hmm.
early. I think it's like being counted in portions, and
Hmm.
the early votes counted, I think, are overwhelmingly no. But I haven't read too much into it. My understanding is that it's not guaranteed yet. It's that because one thing we heard is that the earlier voters did vote no because a lot of them just didn't know anything about a union, um, and that there. I don't know if this was from our reporting or somewhere else, but I remember reading somewhere. It might have been us, but I remember reading somewhere that there were workers who said they voted no at first and then changed their mind once they learned more about the union.
Oh,
So I don't want to go ahead and say it's doomed, but as we started recording this, it certainly was not looking like it was off to a good start.
oh, so
Yeah. But
scary.
I want to highlight because I really do think that I think that it's a lot of times when a fight doesn't, clearly succeed, I've seen a tendency on the left to be like, we failed. And I don't see change that way. I think that, yes, we want this union in Bessemer, but already you have other Amazon facilities. It's being reported that other Amazon facilities are contacting the RWDSU. And I don't think
Awesome.
we should view those as isolated, because I think that one thing we could be is like, oh, this failed, but maybe these will win. No, what we
Yes.
need to do is we need to look and say, oh, these are happening. Let's look at the Bessemer thing, which failed. Let's see what they did right and what they did wrong and apply it. I think
Yes.
uh, sort of I got a sense, I could be wrong, I don't want to like speak for broad issues, but I got the sense that like there's a lot of reasons I think Bernie Sanders his campaign failed, but one thing I think is that everyone just treated it like 2016. Like they
Mhm.
learned nothing from 2016. Not everyone, but it felt like they didn't apply a lot of the stuff that happened in 2016. The rigging, I'm not going to get into a whole thing over the election, but I think that there's this tendency to treat this stuff as it failed this time around. Now let's fight harder. When I think the better idea is it failed that time around, and as we fight now, we need to look at why it failed, and we need to make sure we don't do that.
Yes.
And I think that if this union effort fails, it's important for people to not just support the next efforts, but to specifically support them in a way that looks at this effort and applies it to the next ones.
Absolutely. Well said. Absolutely. Oh, yes, I remember now. We in fact cannot fight harder. We cannot work harder. We should not fight or work harder because we are already fighting so hard to survive, right? So we have to be fighting smarter. We have to be fighting more creative and we have to be fighting with each other and undercut any, because Amazon sending texts, Amazon, some and the nature of some of the texts was telling workers about the lives of other workers and why they chose no. I mean, that builds a sense of community without actually building a real community.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells you the power of community itself, and it speaks to why that community is the number one way to get rid of fascism.
And that's super important because one recurring thing we heard about the working conditions at the facility is that people don't know their coworkers. Like
Yes.
they do not talk to anyone they work with. They don't know them, and I think that is that made reporting hard because even if we could get one or two workers, we had no clue what they thought of the larger community. But it is also important because it shows the lack of community in the facility, and I don't blame those workers at all.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just yelled like inflected weirdly, but I don't blame those
No, you're
workers
good.
at all. It's intentional. Amazon keeps people from talking to one another, it keeps people from having a community among their workers. And so I think you're absolutely right that we need. I think that part of that is why the text may have seemed appealing. Because if you don't know your actual coworkers, but you're getting texts about, like, oh, this person who works at the facility, it brings on that sense of, like, oh, well, I don't know what my coworker is saying, but I know what this person in the text is saying.
Right.
Um, and I think, yeah, the being more tied to a community, even if it doesn't mean that you decide to vote yes, it at least means that you're informed. You know what's going on. You know the bigger picture. And I think you're absolutely right that community is super important to emphasize.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, is there any parting thoughts that you would like to leave with us?
Yes, I just want to plug I'm no longer in Alabama, but as we were leaving, we found out that there were coal miners going on strike.
Yes.
So, right now, Maddie and Luigi, the two who got harassed by the cops, they flew back and they're covering that.
Wow.
And then another thing is that while we were there, I mentioned we recorded interviews with local activists, a lot of their, um, fight against police violence, against the black community. We're going to, I don't know when, but eventually be publishing more of that content.
Excellent.
So people, just because the union effort is sort of winding down, one doesn't mean you should stop following Buff Voice. We cover a lot. But two, just there's so much going on in Alabama that I think won't. I mean, not I think it won't get the type of platform that the Amazon union effort got because it's not like the big media story. But I think that these are people who really could benefit their struggles. They're fighting really hard, and their struggles could benefit from people boosting their platforms. And so I really hope that people will keep their eyes on Alabama, even if the big news isn't coming out of there.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Um, all right. Well, everybody go and follow Left Voice. Everybody go and follow Sam in the Can on Twitter. Everybody go and follow Newsdive Radio on Twitter. Is that right? Awesome.
Yes.
And follow me, Malensplain, on Twitter as well. And thank you so much for coming on. This has been a really excellent conversation, and I'm so excited to start putting it out there because we cannot let this go away. We have to keep talking about it. We have to keep trying again and again and again. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime. This has been great. Thanks.